The stage lights dimmed, and the buzz of the audience began to fade into a curious murmur as the next contestant walked out. A young Filipino man, maybe in his late 20s, took small but steady steps toward the center of the America's Got Talent stage. He wasn't dressed like the average contestant. His outfit sparkled under the spotlight, a white jumpsuit adorned with rhinestones, complete with a high collar and a golden belt. He looked like a flashback to another era. Some people chuckled softly, others whispered, and even the judges shared quick glances, trying to figure out what was about to unfold. Simon Cowell leaned back in his chair, slightly skeptical, one eyebrow raised in that familiar way that signaled, "This should be interesting." The contestant held the microphone with both hands, visibly nervous but still wearing a shy, respectful smile. When Howie asked his name, he replied softly, "My name is Arvin, and I'm from the Philippines." His accent was gentle, warm, full of humility. Sophia smiled and asked what brought him here. He took a deep breath, his voice trembling slightly as he said, "I grew up listening to Elvis Presley with my father. He taught me all his songs. He passed away last year, and tonight, I just want to honor him with this performance." The moment grew still, the audience sensing something sincere in his tone. Simon's expression softened a little, though he still looked unsure. The crowd, which had been whispering moments ago, now waited in silence. As the first soft guitar notes of "Can't Help Falling in Love" filled the room, something shifted. The familiar melody echoed through the hall, and then came Arvin's voice, deep, rich, velvety smooth. The very first line made the entire audience lean forward. It wasn't just an imitation, it was hauntingly authentic. His tone carried that unmistakable Elvis resonance but wrapped in a tenderness that was all his own. Simon's eyebrows rose slightly, his skeptical smirk vanishing as he listened more intently. Heidi's lips parted in surprise, Sophia's eyes widened, and Howie exchanged a quick look with her that said, "Did you hear that?" As Arvin sang, his voice filled every corner of the theater. He closed his eyes on the long notes, the emotion pouring out of him like he was reliving every memory he ever had with his father. The audience, which had started the performance with cautious curiosity, now sat completely silent, mesmerized. The sound technician's screens glowed with perfect waveforms, his control and power were extraordinary. When he reached the second verse, his voice grew stronger, carrying more soul, more heart. The gentle rock and roll twang blended perfectly with his Filipino warmth. People began to nod, caught in the emotion of the song. A woman in the front row put her hand on her heart. Then came the subtle changes. He added a delicate vibrato, a personal touch that separated him from being just another impersonator. You could feel that this wasn't simply a man trying to be Elvis. This was a son singing through the memory of his father. Halfway through, the giant screen behind him lit up unexpectedly, showing a faded photo of young Arvin with his father, both smiling, both holding an old guitar. The audience gasped quietly. It wasn't planned as a flashy stage trick, it was raw, human, and filled with love. The emotion in his voice deepened as the image lingered. When he sang the line, "Take my hand, take my whole life too," his voice trembled, not from fear but from emotion that couldn't be hidden. Simon leaned forward, resting his chin on his hand, clearly moved though trying not to show it too much. Sophia wiped a tear discreetly from her eye, and Heidi just whispered, "Oh my God," under her breath. You could feel that this was no longer a performance. It had turned into a conversation between a son and the memory of his father. By the time Arvin reached the final chorus, the energy in the room had changed completely. The audience began to cheer quietly, clapping along softly at first and then louder as his voice soared. The guitar faded and his voice carried the final note, a long, emotional tone that seemed to hang in the air forever. When the music finally stopped, there was a heartbeat of silence. Then, as if released all at once, the entire theater exploded into applause. The crowd stood up instantly. People shouted and clapped, waving their arms, and even the judges were on their feet. Sophia was smiling through tears. Heidi clapped above her head, calling out, "That was unbelievable." Howie laughed in amazement, shaking his head and saying, "I thought you were going to do an Elvis impression, but you just gave us Elvis reborn." Arvin stood there, overwhelmed, covering his face for a moment as the crowd cheered. He wasn't used to this kind of attention, it was clear from the way his hands trembled around the microphone. When the applause finally quieted down, Simon took the microphone. Everyone waited to hear what he would say. He looked at Arvin for a long moment, then smiled slightly and said, "I'll be honest, when you walked out here dressed like that, I thought, oh no, not another impersonator. But then you sang, and suddenly, I forgot Elvis was even a performer. You made me believe he was a feeling. That's a rare gift." The crowd roared again at his words. Arvin's eyes welled up with tears as he whispered a simple, "Thank you." He looked both humbled and shocked by the response. Sophia added, "You brought so much heart to this stage. You reminded us why we love these moments, because sometimes talent isn't about showing off. It's about sharing love." Heidi nodded and said, "You sounded exactly like Elvis, but the emotion made it even better. I could feel every word." Howie leaned closer to the microphone and said, "You didn't just honor your father tonight, you honored Elvis himself." The audience began chanting his name softly, "Arvin! Arvin! Arvin!" The chants grew louder, blending into claps and cheers. Simon looked around at the other judges, then back at Arvin, and said with a smirk, "You know what? I think this deserves something special." Before anyone could react, Simon slammed his hand down on the golden buzzer. Instantly, the sound of the buzzer filled the hall, and golden confetti burst from the ceiling, raining down over the stage like a storm of light. Arvin froze in disbelief, his mouth open, eyes wide as the golden paper fluttered around him. The crowd went wild, standing, clapping, shouting, jumping up and down. The stage glowed with bright golden light, and Simon stood up, clapping for him with genuine joy. Arvin fell to his knees in shock, the microphone still in his hand. Tears streamed down his face, and he looked up toward the ceiling, whispering, "This is for you, Dad." The camera zoomed in on his face as he smiled through the tears, surrounded by the shimmering gold confetti. The judges' table sparkled, and Sophia leaned over to hug Heidi, who was crying too. Howie held his hands up, saying, "This is what this show is all about." Simon walked up onto the stage, shaking Arvin's hand and giving him a quick, heartfelt hug, a rare gesture from him. He said softly, "Your dad would be very proud tonight." Arvin nodded, unable to speak, overwhelmed by emotion. The crowd wouldn't stop cheering, they wanted more, shouting, "Encore! Encore!" The stage lights dimmed again, but the golden confetti still floated in the air like memories that refused to fade. Arvin finally stood, taking one deep breath as if trying to capture the entire moment in his heart. He looked around the massive hall filled with smiling faces, raised his microphone one last time, and softly repeated the final line of the song a cappella, "Take my hand, take my whole life too." The audience sang the last words with him, "For I can't help falling in love with you." The moment felt like a dream, a perfect union of talent, love, and destiny. It wasn't just about sounding like Elvis anymore. It was about proving that no matter where you come from, no matter how far from Graceland or Hollywood you live, music and love have no borders. That night, a Filipino man in a rhinestone jumpsuit made the world believe again in the power of voice and heart. As the credits rolled on that episode, clips of Arvin hugging his family backstage appeared. His mother was crying, holding the photo of his father, saying, "He's smiling in heaven, my son. He's smiling." Arvin looked into the camera and said, "I didn't expect this. I just wanted to sing for my dad. But maybe tonight, he sang with me." And somewhere in that giant, glowing theater, amid the echo of cheers and the golden rain of confetti, it truly felt like the spirit of Elvis himself had stood up to applaud.